Okay, good morning. I'm gonna report today the lesson 2 of the chapter 5, the categoral imperatives and utilitarianism. Categoral imperative in the ethics of the 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant, founder of critical philosophy, a moral law that is unconditional or absolute for all agents, the validity or claim of which does not depend on any ulterior motive or end. Um, Kant Kant characterized the categoral imperative as an objective, rationally necessary, and unconditional principle that we must always follow despite any natural desires or inclinations we may have to the contrary. All specific moral requirements, according to Kant, are justified by this principle, which means that all immoral actions are irrational because they violate the categoral imperative. Kant argued that conformity to a non-instrumental principle, and hence to moral requirements themselves, can nevertheless be shown to the essential to rational agency. This argument was based on his striking doctrine that a rational will must be regarded as autonomous or free in the sense of being the author of the law that binds it. The fundamental principle of morality none other than the law of autonomous will, Patton, 1947. Categoral imperative. The categoral imperative was devised by Immanuel Kant to provide a set of requirements a maxim or motivation must pass in order for the action to be considered a moral obligation. When a categoral imperative is established, it becomes one's moral duty to carry out the action under any circumstances. In carrying out this action, the individual's primary motive should always be duty, according to Kant. This is because we can decipher what our duty is by using our reason. Humans' ability to reason is what differs us from animals, and so logically must be part of being a moral agent. Reason is objective and universal for humanity, and so reliable and reasonable basis for a moral theory. Kant holds that the fundamental principle of our moral duties is a categoral imperative. It is an imperative because it's a command addressed to agents who could follow it but might not. It is categoral in virtue of applying to us unconditionally or simply because we possess a rational wills without reference to any ends that we might or might not have. It does not, in other words, apply to us on the condition that we have antecedently adopted some goal for ourselves. The categoral imperative is determined by referring to the three formulations, namely, formula of the law of nature. It insists that we should act only according to the maxim, motivation, which could be universalized. This means that we must be able to universalize a principle without contradiction. If it's not possible, it can logically assume that the act is moral, it's counter to reason. If a rule is not universalizable, then others will not be free to act from the same moral principles, and Kant strongly believe that autonomy and freedom were essential to being a moral agent. Next is the formula of end. It ensures that you never treat others or oneself merely as a means, but always as an end to use someone merely to exploit their rationality, and we should value everyone as a rational beings. Formula of a kingdom of end asks for us to act as if a legislating member in the universal kingdom of ends. The kingdom of ends is a world in which everyone acts from categoral imperatives, and although we may not live in this world, we must act as if we are. According to this formula, we must act on the assumption that everyone will follow the rules you make through your actions. The intended action passes each of the formulation. It is categorical imperative and thus not only right but a moral obligation. Utilitarianism. Though the first systematic account of utilitarianism was developed by Jeremy Bentham, the core insight motivating the theory occurred much earlier. That insight is that morally appropriate behavior will not harm others but instead increase happiness or utility. What is distinctive about utilitarianism is its approach in taking that insight and developing an account of moral evaluation and moral direction that expanded it. Early precursors to the classical utilitarian include the British moralist Cumberland, Shaftesbury, Hutcheson, Gay, and Hume. Of these, Francis Hutcheson is explicitly utilitarian when it comes to action choices. Okay. The classical utilitarians, Bentham and Mill, were concerned with legal and social reform. If anything could be identified as the fundamental motivation behind the development of classical utilitarianism, it would be the desire to see useless, corrupt law and social practices change. Accomplishing this goal required a normative ethical theory employed as a critical tool. What is the truth about what makes an action or policy morally a good one or morally right? But developing the theory itself was also influenced by strong views about what's wrong in their society. The conviction that, for example, is some laws are bad resulted in analysis of why they were bad, and for Jeremy Bentham, what made them bad was their lack of utility. Their tendency to lead to unhappiness and misery without any compensating happiness. If its law or an action doesn't do any good, then it is not any good. It's not any good. Ito, balik lang tayo kay Bentham. Bentham's view. On Bentham's view, the law is not monolithic, immutable. Since effects of a given policy may change, the moral quality of the policy may change as well. A law that is good at one point in time may be a bad law at some other point in time. Thus, lawmakers have to be sensitive to changing social circumstances to be fair on Bentham's critics. Of course, they are free to agree with him that is the case in many situations, just not all, and that there is still a subset of law that reflect the fact that some actions just are intrinsically wrong regardless of consequences. Bentham is in the much more difficult position of arguing the effects are all to moral evaluation of actions and policy. Utilitarian philosophy. Utilitarianism is a philosophical view or theory about how we should evaluate a wide range of things that involve choices that people face. Among the things that can be evaluated are actions, laws, policy, character traits, and moral codes. Utilitarianism is a form of consequentialism because it rests on the idea that it's the consequences or results of actions, laws, policies, and etc. that determine whether they are good or bad, right or wrong. In general, whatever is being evaluated, we fought to choose the one that will produce the best in overall result. In the language of utilitarians, we should choose the option that maximizes utility, that action or policy that produce the largest amount good. Utilitarianism is generally held to be the view of the morally right action as the action that produces the best. There are many ways to spell out this general claim. One thing is note that this theory is a form of consequentialism. Consequentialism is the right action is understood entirely in terms of consequences reduced. Utilitarianism is the idea that the moral worth of an action is solely determined by its contribution to overall utility in maximizing happiness or pleasure as a sum among all people. It is then um, the utility of individual which is important here, our greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. Utility after which of the doctrine is named this new measure in economics of the relative satisfaction from or desirability of the consumption of goods. Utilitarianism can thus be described as a quantitative and reductionistic approach to ethics. So, utilitarians, since the early 20th century, so the utilitarians believe nga that the purpose of morality is to make life better. So, utilitarianism has undergone a variety of refinement. After the middle of the 20th century, it has become more common to identify as a consequentialist, since very few philosophers agree entirely with the view proposed by the classical utilitarians, particularly with respect to the hedonistic value theory. But the influence of the classical utilitarians has been profound not only within moral philosophy but within political philosophy and social policy. The question Bentham asked what use it is. It is a cornerstone of policy formation. It is a completely secular forward-looking question. The articulation and systematic development of this approach to policy formation is owed to the classical utilitarianism. Yun lang po. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.